Oh.
Oh, she's not
She's
gonna
not
set
gonna
over
sit
here?
over here?
You have a replacement lined up?
He's sitting right out there.
She might as well sit over there and
Yeah, we told her she should sit over here.
well, you get the feel. Well, I'd like to just sink or swim. And you'll be swimming. Doing fine. Did you learn shorthand yet? Okay.
She'll survive without shorthand.
Oh, yeah.
She'll have to.
Oh, this is a good one. Says,
Well, yeah, she doesn't know
maybe
shorthand.
Good evening, everyone.
How are you? Good.
Welcome to this in-depth Muscatine City Council meeting. Fran, would you please do the roll call?
Councilmembers Raywalt.
Present.
Fitzgerald.
Present.
Nutfig.
Present.
Saucedo.
Present.
Bynum. Harvey.
Present.
Spread.
Present.
6 present and 1 absent, Your Honor.
Thank you, Fran. Tonight's in-depth meeting just has a few things on the agenda. We're going to go right on into number 2. We have a request to approve the purchase of weight indicator controller for the tunnel scale application. Do I have a motion to accept the request as submitted?
So moved.
Second.
Tom.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The request is approved with all ayes. Number 3 on tonight's agenda, we're going to have a review of the proposed ballot question for the local option sales tax renewal referendum that's upcoming. And Nancy's going to lead us through.
We actually reviewed this at the September in-depth meeting, our proposal for the renewal of the local option sales tax that included the financing for the West Hill Sewer Project, the proposed longer-term renewal of the local option tax period. The memo that was attached to the agenda has some dates on it, and I'm just going to go through it pretty quickly. Just as a reminder, the EPA consent order deadline is the end of December 2028. The reminder, current local option sales tax EPA consent order deadline is the end of December 2028. The reminder, current local option sales tax EPA consent order deadline is the end of December 2028. The reminder, current local option sales tax EPA consent order deadline is the end of December 2028. The reminder, current local option sales tax EPA consent order deadline is the end of December 2028. The reminder, current local option sales tax EPA consent order deadline is the end of December. Based on our current estimates, about 2023, we option sales tax EPA consent order deadline is the end of December. Based on our current estimates, about 2023, option sales tax EPA consent order deadline is the end of December. Based on our current estimates, about 2023, option sales tax EPA consent order deadline is the end of December. Based on our current estimates, about 2023, option sales tax EPA consent order deadline is the end of December. Based on our current estimates, about 2023, option sales tax EPA consent order deadline is the end of December. Based on our current estimates, about 2023, option sales tax EPA consent order deadline is the end of December. Based on our current estimates, about 2023, option sales tax EPA consent order deadline is the end of December. Based on our current estimates, about 2023, option sales tax EPA consent order deadline is the end of December. Based on our current estimates, about 2023, based on our current estimates, about 2023. Similar to what was done. Based on our current estimates, about 2023. And also references. Based on our current estimates, about 2023. Language that was has to be a special election. So this is for March 6th. And then we also have two special elections. We're bringing it up again tonight just to see if there's any questions from you. Otherwise, agenda for next week and not wait until the map switch deadline.
Deadline state, deadlines.
Yes, you can only hold special elections 4 different times during a year. And then you kind of back up from there as far as, yes, when the requests are special election, it's a deadline for the request. Yeah, those 4 dates are set by the state. There as far as.
How much has the loan interest rate fluctuated historically in the state?
It has, for years it was 3.3% plus a 0.25% fee. It has gone down since then to 2%, including 3% plus a 0.25%. We can't predict what it will be in 2022 or 2023, but we have no reason to think that it's going to be significantly different. Any other questions? Okay, we'll bring it back again next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Any other questions?
The next thing on tonight's agenda is a presentation on the Allen Street sewer issue. Brian's going to talk to us about that. The next thing on tonight's agenda is a presentation on the Allen Street sewer issue. Brian's going to talk to
Pull
us
this
about
up here
that.
quickly.
The next thing on tonight's agenda is a presentation on the Allen Street sewer issue. Brian's going to talk to
Pull
us
this up
about
here
that.
quickly.
The next thing on tonight's agenda
Okay, so a month or so ago, or maybe more, probably more, this has been brought to our attention. It's been going on for quite a while. So I did some research, put together a presentation for tonight for council's information. The area that we're discussing are the 2 red boxes there. The red on the left is Mr. Burr's home. The one on the right is the current lift station. So I kind of wanted to jump briefly into the historical information. I put that in the council packets. Hopefully you had a chance to look at that. I wasn't going to bring it up today unless you have any questions. The gist of it was that backflow preventer probably could be would work here and solve this issue. So if there aren't any questions, I'll skip through that now and just come back to it later. So the area in blue is the sanitary sewer drainage issue or drainage area that goes to the lift station. It's roughly 127 acres. It all kind of drains to that low spot, which is the area in red there. So my cartoons will pop up and show you where most of that goes. And then it's pumped through the lift station to the north, and then it goes out around town. It goes back in around to the Papoose Creek and goes to the wastewater control plant. So it's kind of pumped up and around the town. If you look at the stormwater aspect of that, you add the field there to the northeast, it's another 13 acres or so. So you've got about 140 acres in that drainage area. Similarly, it drains to the lowest spot there on Allen Street, and then it's piped to just to the west, and then it goes out to the northwest to the ravine. So that's the area that we're dealing with watershed-wise. So just kind of a little plumbing 101, I guess, here, if you will. Typical sanitary sewer setup, you've got your home, your foundation, your basement. You have a main drain at the bottom that goes out to the sanitary main line and is taken away. So when those work, it fills up the pipe. The pipe in this situation goes to the lift station. It fills up the wet well. When the wet well hits to the pump elevation, it's pumped out and it goes that route that I showed you previously. What we think is happening here, we're pretty sure is happening in this area, is we have an inflow situation where a typical house, you may have a sump pump that would pump to your sanitary sewer line, or a foundation drain, or your downspouts and your gutters, they all go to the same line, and it goes into the sanitary sewer line, which back in the day was not necessarily illegal, but it is now. It's basically a cross connection that we do not allow. So when that situation happens, if we get a heavy rainfall event, that extra water goes into the pipe, which goes to the lift station and fills up the wet well, and then the pumps kick on. So when that situation happens, this is how we deal with it. But there's 4 limiting factors when you have this kind of inflow in the pipe system. The first one is the size of the pipe itself, the receiving pipe. The second one is the size of the wet well. The third would be the capacity of the pumps, and then the fourth is the size of the pipe that goes out. And so the analogy that I use here is, if we all, let's say we all wanted to get down the alley, we're using the fire escape. There's plenty of room in the alley, right? But we can't all get to the door down the fire escape at the same time. So those are limiting factors. We don't design the doors to be 30 feet wide to get everybody out at one time. We don't design fire escapes that wide to get everybody down at the same time. So those limiting factors are what we're dealing with. And those are mostly done on an economic scale, an engineering scale, so that we can get the maximum size that we can afford to put in there to do the best that we can to drain a block or a foundation or whatever. So that's the limiting factors here that we're dealing with. Get the maximum size that we can afford. When those don't work, then obviously the water's going to find the lowest way to get out. Unfortunately, in some instances, that could be somebody's basement or their own sanitary sewer plumbing. When those don't work, then obviously... So this first solution that we devised is just a simple backflow preventer. A flapper-style valve where the water can go out, but it can't come back in. So if those are installed and maintained correctly, that solves the problem there. It doesn't solve the bigger problem with the inflow, but it would individually stop everybody's issues. If those are installed and maintained correctly, yeah, sure. Yes, you may.
You know, the only comment I have with that, with the flapper backflow preventer,
yeah, sure.
basically,
yes, you may.
It keeps it from coming back in a house after everything with kosher, but flapper residents can't use the facilities.
You can't flush your toilets during that, or you're done.
Yes.
I mean, you just
right. It's a one-way valve.
yeah.
Yep. There are different ways to design that and design around that. Jim can explain that later. He's got one on his own property that works well for him, and we'll go on that later. But yes, you're all correct that if the flapper valve works properly, it doesn't go back. Well, if a flapper valve, you can go out, you can't come back in. But if you're under pressure, if you flush, it should go
But
through.
if it's
up
got
against
pressure
if
on
it's
the
up
one
against the
side,
head pressure, you're right. It won't.
You'll
not
never
gonna
get the
get
flap
enough.
shut again.
Correct. You're right.
Right.
So yes, that has its own limits as well. And like I said, it's not the ultimate solution for this whole problem, but it is a solution for this instance.
Can I stop you for a second and ask a question?
Sure.
You said that this wasn't illegal before, but it is illegal now?
Yes.
Illegal by
City code.
city code?
Yes,
So
employment.
it's
we
not
have-
illegal statewide
No, we
or
have
anything
an
like that?
EPA consent order where it's doing a sewer separation project. If we feed into the sanitary system, we're just making the problem bigger.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I was just asking,
Yes.
what makes it illegal?
Correct. If you were to build a house today, you could not tie it in the
By
sanitary
city
system.
code?
Yes.
Okay.
And you can't. But if the field or perimeter tile gets tied in before an inspection is done, nobody's going to know.
Correct.
And there could be a sump pump put in a pit, but we don't require the pump to be installed before inspections. So you could go to the basement and look and go, oh yeah, they got a sump pump hole, so this is all legal. But that pump doesn't go anywhere and there's nothing coming into the pit. It's because it's already tied in. I mean, it's just a matter of timing the inspections.
It's an inspection and enforcement difficulty issue, for sure. Yeah.
When you walk in the basement and there's a pipe coming up out of the sump pump and it goes over and drops into the sanitary, bingo, that's an easy one to fix.
Right.
And
So,
identify.
yes, and go ahead.
Kind of mentioning what they're just talking about. So of these 127 acres that we have, are homes there currently running their gutters into the sanitary sewers?
I can't be sure without an inspection. I don't know. We can presume that some of them probably are, but I have no idea to say that certainly.
And I've had 2 plumbers in town. One had his own business at the time. The other one was working for Thornton Plumbing at the time. And pretty much the 2 of them assured me that there's probably 99.9% chance that all of the homes over there have perimeter tile tied into the sanitary. Because it was the thing to do.
Sumps too?
Pardon?
Sumps also tied in?
No, they don't have sumps.
No.
They don't have sumps, huh?
Not if it's connected to the sanitary sewer,
If
but
it's
that's a big-
connected to the sanitary, they don't need a sump pump.
When you start talking about removing your limiting factors, that's one, for me, that would be a huge limiting factor that we could kind of take as a first step as well too, or a low-hanging
Yeah.
fruit to
And
start saying, hey, can we do that?
Yep, I'll get into that here in just a second.
Okay, all right, I'm sorry then.
That's all right. So I'll keep moving on then. So, option A, would be the simple installation and maintenance of a backflow preventer. It costs anywhere between $100 and $3,000. I'm not a plumber, I'm not sure. This is what I've heard. It was agreed to during the initial lawsuit, and I talked to a couple neighbors in this area that have the working backflow preventers, and they've had no issues whatsoever. So I know that, at least for those houses, that it does work for them.
What initial lawsuit?
In the packet that you got before, there was a lawsuit filed by Mr. Burr, and the city insurance, I believe, settled that. So option B would be to remove the cross connections, as Councilman Saucedo suggested. So we would take those. What would happen is all these cross connections that go to the pipe would have to be then taken up into or onto the property. So your downspouts would go into your yard. Your sump pump, if you had one, would go to your yard. Foundation drain would need to go to a sump pump and then be ejected up into the yard so that the water doesn't go into the sanitary sewer. So this would require, well, let me go back here. So this would require some inspections from someone. We're not quite sure who would do that yet. This is, once again, the watershed area, the number of houses. There's over 155 homes that were identified in the watershed area that would need to be inspected. We're not sure who would do that right now. It's not budgeted anywhere. Any of the illegal connections then would be ordered to be disconnected at the owner's expense. The estimated cost based on the Schaff report that was also in your packet was between $5,000 and $7,000 each. Currently, the city is not set up to have any funding assistance for this type of program. And then a final issue with this is that if we require all these 155 homes to discharge their water to the surface, we're not equipped, other than the street, to handle that water on the surface water. So it would have to go into your yard, and then if it doesn't sink into your yard, soak into your yard, it goes to the street. It gets carried by curb and gutter to the nearest intake. A lot of those intakes are pretty far away, so we might be looking at icing on the street or wet streets and curbs and things like that that are not anticipated at this time or haven't been an issue previously in this neighborhood.
And we used to have an issue, I don't remember it's a brown house. It sets down on the west side. I don't know what the address is, but out in front of that, we used to run, the water would run curb deep and actually run over the curb and then down his driveway. And so I don't know how many years ago this has been, but we put in another intake and tied it to the others. And so I haven't heard of any curb deep water for quite a while.
Right. And
by adding that
I haven't either, but I haven't been here that long, but I know that we have not budgeted in. I didn't actually run an estimate to add additional storm sewer. I guess my suggestion would be if we chose option B, to daylight them all, see what happens, see where the water goes, and we can plan from there. If we know we have a problem area here, maybe not over here, there's no reason to put all the infrastructure in if we don't necessarily need it in a certain location.
So even the fact that the people did it wrong, or if it wasn't wrong then, it is now, it is helping us in a way by keeping it off the streets and the storm issue. It's not making a stormwater issue.
It's not making a surface water issue,
Right.
yes. Right. It is causing us problems in the sanitary sewer system, but yeah.
So if it was the other way, it would just give us a different issue.
And
Yes.
taking water to the water pollution control plant, clean water to the water pollution control plant is a problem as well.
Right, we're treating clean water essentially, and we're also surcharging those pipes that, have the other issues associated with
Sure.
them.
Hydraulic loading.
I'm not aware of, well, actually, yeah, that was on Dawson Street, on the other side of Hauser. I can remember a 12 o'clock midnight phone call from the resident about sewage water backing up in his basement. I thought it was mostly on Allen Street, but it's actually on the other side of Hauser Street.
Probably
also.
this entire drainage area would be affected, it's all,
And depending on your elevation, like
definitely.
on Allen Street, that's lower, and so they get hit first.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, okay.
But
Matt
when you
did
say
a-
100 and, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Matt did a presentation a while back on the number of sewer backups that we have on an annual basis, and my recollection was it's between 1 and 3 on an annual basis, so it dramatically reduced with our 5-year inspection program. So,
That's true, yes.
Except
Only one this calendar year.
yeah, there wasn't,
the only thing I'll tell you is that the residents out there, basically, they don't call because they do have valves. They do as much work as they can possibly do, and they don't want to advertise the fact that they got a sewer problem because they may want to sell their house.
Okay.
And who's going to buy a house that's been in the paper or been reported to the city a half a dozen times for having sewer backup?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can claim, you can say that on one side that we haven't had the sewer backups, but if they're not getting any response
Yeah, well,
from the
if they have a
city,
backflow
why would
and
they
it's, and it's
call?
working, then they wouldn't also. I mean, it's, it's,
I know,
it's
yeah,
give and take there.
that's good.
Brian, if you have a street and the house at the end is having a problem, and they put the check valve in it, the backflow valve, and the next house does the same thing, is that just gonna make it be worse on the third house then?
It would push
And isn't it just gonna be a chain reaction up the street?
potentially, yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. Option C was discussed to reroute the sanitary sewer and try to gravity flow it down to Hauser Street. And so I broke this out into 3 different sections for consideration because it's a long ways. So the first piece would be, well, the 2 red circles, and I don't have a pointer, but maybe.
You got a circle.
So right
there's
there,
one on
There you go.
this is the northern end. Everything from this manhole drains to the lift station. This is the southern end, we'll call it. Everything from this manhole drains this way to the lift station here, just for reference. So once again, there's the watershed, the drainage area that's piped. So phase 1 would be to basically reverse the flow from on Hauser Street from Allen to Lucas. So in order to do that, we'd have to adjust them and lower the manholes that are there and install new pipe, because we'd have to increase the size of the pipe. We can't run a smaller pipe or a large pipe into a small pipe. We'd have to do that backwards. So we have to put in new pipe. So basically, it's these manholes here, starting at the first one. This one would stay. This one at Allen would stay. The rest of these all have to be lowered in order, because there's a 10-foot difference here, surface elevation difference between Hauser and Allen. So I drew a, sorry, there's the new line. So I drew a kind of a shortened cross-section version. I didn't put all the manholes on here, but you get the kind of the gist going from south to north. This would be Lucas Street crossing, the Fairhaven crossing, Broadlawn crossing, Allen Street. This is all, if the top part going down would be Hauser. So the manhole elevations here at Lucas are about 16 feet. This one's 14, and as you can see, the pipe goes downhill and continues to go downhill until it gets to the lift station where it's pumped up. So in order to get the slope, we have to increase the pipe size to a 10-inch pipe from an 8-inch pipe. And the minimum slope on that is 0.24%. That way it keeps things moving so we don't have anything stopping in the middle of the pipe. Over 800 feet, we had to increase the depth 2.4 feet, which isn't a lot at Allen Street. It wouldn't change at Allen, but by the time you get 2.4 feet down at Lucas Street, these manholes now become incredibly deep, 24 feet, 27 feet, and 30 feet deep, which is very difficult to construct and to get into. It's 30 feet taller than the ceiling in here, if you can imagine that. So that's what we're dealing with. In order to build that, you can't just dig open the street, because you'd be in people's front yards with the setbacks to get your pit dug right. So you're looking at boring and what they call, what do they call that?
Directional boring.
Micro boring.
Oh.
So you'd basically auger down a hole and then bore this way and bore this way and then auger down a hole and bore it. So that way you're only taking up the street and then not the whole yards and everything else. So this is an estimate. The dollar amounts that I got here were based on the average amounts of the bids for Mississippi Drive sewer. So they're somewhat recent. Traffic control mobilization those are more estimates based on other projects. But to remove the pavement, to add the pipe, and this pipe, because it's so deep and because it has to be bored, it gets very expensive. $450 a foot to put in pipe is the average cost, and that's incredibly expensive. So we're looking at $360,000 just to put in the pipe. The manholes are incredibly expensive because they're so deep. They're $75,000 a piece to do the manholes because of the depth and what's required to put them in there. And so it ends up being almost $850,000. And this, like I said, this is this is rough. This is only 5 bid items. There's probably going to be 40 more. I mean, based on if we bid it out to contract it, it's going to be probably closer to $1 million, I would assume, for 800 feet of pipe. So that's the first phase. That gets us to Lucas Street. So if we go from Lucas then down to Hershey, to get down the hill, we have to put in another 3,086 feet of pipe, and we have to install manholes to turn the corners and things like that. So this would be the section we're talking about now, to run the pipe down the hill where we can catch it into the existing manhole and system at Hershey Avenue. This is the estimate here. The price for pipe gets less because we don't have to go quite as deep, but we are coming out of a 30-foot deep manhole. So at the beginning, it's going to be a very deep excavation until we can kind of daylight out towards the hill and get shallower as we come down the hill. 466,000, that's, like I said, rough and without all the rest of the line items in there. So that would be to phase 2. And then for phase 3,
You can't do phase 1 without doing phase 2, can you?
if we just did phase 1, we'd have stuff sitting in the pipe, so it gets pumped out. Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd have to do all 3 of these phases to make this work.
They're not independent.
They're independent. I just broke them out so we could see them here and kind of tackle them a piece at a time. So phase 3 goes from the manhole at Hershey down to the lift station. And so that's new pipe because we have to increase the size. Now we're getting more sewage in the pipe. So as we go farther away, the pipe has to get larger. We have to adjust more manholes. And we don't know at this time whether or not the lift station that is existing can handle the increased flow. Because now we're bringing 127 acres worth of flow to this lift station that wasn't necessarily designed for that. So there has to be a consideration in there of what's it cost to increase the lift station.
So Hershey's, that's a lift station down there?
Not at Hershey, but at the park, down by the slough, right down here.
Okay.
That's the lift station right there.
Oh,
That pumps it back to the plant.
And it's got a round top on it? Because it's not a regular lift station building.
It's
Is there?
okay. I'm not sure, but I just know that it's
That's
there.
all right then.
Okay.
It was redone, I want to say 4 years ago or so.
But that pumps it down to the plant from the slough,
Okay.
down across Oneida Avenue and down around that way.
Okay.
So this is the pipe configuration. Basically, it's just new pipe going down there. So the piping and stuff is relatively, inexpensive, I guess. What happens is that the lift station, a cost for a new lift station is about $1.5 million. Like we said, at this point, we can't determine if that will handle that or not. But I wanted to have a placeholder in there so that if it doesn't, then we take out $1.5 million and we're down to about $500,000 for this piece. But being conservative and things like that, we want to have it in there at least for now. So that's where we are. So just a comparison chart. Option A is just a simple backflow preventer, anywhere from zero city cost, $100 to $1,000 on the homeowner. Option B, the disconnect. The only cost I have in there right now for the city cost is the cost of the inspection, and I'm just assuming 8 inspections per day, take about an hour a piece, maybe with people and everything else, at a standard labor rate for one of our sewer workers. Take 155 inspections, take about 19 days. So we're about $5,000 for inspection cost. If we decide we needed to put in new storm sewer, things like that, then obviously those costs would increase. The price for the homeowner, though, is substantial, $5,000 to $7,000 per homeowner. With 155 homeowners, they're looking at anywhere between $750,000 and over $1 million of private, I guess, investment if they have to do it themselves.
So,
And I think you're a little large on that number personally.
Okay. 3,000?
In my head, it seems like it was under 2.
Okay. I took the number from the Schaff report, which is a couple years old, so that I don't know if that's a good or bad number.
Because some of the ones that a couple of them have replaced, they had to replace the sewer line.
Sure.
And so when they were there, they disconnected.
Yeah.
Because they told them
I
that
guess
this is no
maybe
longer legal, so you have to and they'd put it back into the sump and create a sump hole.
Mm-hmm.
But
So you're talking the overall cost, not the individual cost. You think it's high?
I think you're $5,000 to $7,000
high.
per resident I think is high.
And that's entirely possible. I didn't call for estimates or anything like that. I didn't ask. I just used that number that was out of there. But, and, you know, and if there's a possibility that we're doing 155 at a time, maybe you get a discount rate or something like that, you know, if they're already in the area. I'm not trying to be funny, but I mean,
Yeah, I know.
there might be a possibility. Anyway, that's the number that I have just for comparison purposes. The total price for option C is about 3.2 million. I would say that that does include the 1.5 for a new lift station if necessary. So you could cut that back to 1.5 million. I think that's still low. We don't have all of the pipe sizing done. It would take some survey. There's other bid items on there besides the 5 or 6 that I had up there.
Yeah.
So
it's probably a $4 million project.
it's hard to say, but
I mean, you just
I
want to
wouldn't
throw
be
a number at it.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was
Yeah.
that much.
I need to help, I need you to help me understand how we even can consider option C. If we're in the middle of an $80 million project to separate sanitary sewer and storm sewer, and then we're going to improve the sanitary lines and take more stormwater, isn't that a contravention of the EPA enforcement order? I don't get it.
It doesn't make a lot of sense, does it?
No.
Yeah, all I did was, the suggestion was made, we could run it down Hauser Street, so I just put
Yeah.
the numbers together for what it would
Yeah.
take. That, I
Brian,
mean,
if-
it's council's decision, obviously, whatever, so.
Brian, if we went with B though, shouldn't we add in another cost to the city to address the groundwater issue?
We probably would have to, yes, and without knowing what that is right now, I can't put that in there, but there would definitely be more than $5,000, I'm sure, by the time we were done.
So that cost is like almost $800,000 to the residents in the Hauser Allen Street area if you use your 5,000. I think it was 5,000 I run through the calculator. So
If we
That's
ordered
sizable.
if we ordered all the sanitary disconnect, and that's assuming that everyone is connected to the sanitary too. That might not be the case either, but yeah, the private investment here is, yeah, $750,000, I guess, to do that.
Can we explore more of Tom's question, please? About the consent order, et cetera, et cetera.
What are you asking me?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I think what Tom was saying is that the option C just changes gravity sewer. It doesn't fix the infiltration problem. So he's right. We would just be moving stormwater as well and still allowing it into our system, which is, yeah, against our consent order. So I just threw this together just because I was asked what it would take to do a gravity sewer to get rid of the pump station if that was, deemed to be the problem that's causing all this.
To address your issue, you'd have to do B and C.
that was one of my requests.
Yeah. So
Let me ask a question on the consent order, though.
Yeah.
Is the consent order to not put sanitary sewer into the river or not to put stormwater into the treatment plant?
Latter part.
I believe it is to disconnect the sanitary from the storm sewer system. So,
But they have to have a reason to tell us to do that. If everything went to the treatment plant, why would the EPA care?
well, combined sewer overflow is the reason we don't. So when your sewers combine, like during the rainfall event, and it can't handle it, it overflows and goes to the river or whatever.
So they don't want, they
do not
don't want
Sewage
stormwater
in
going
the
to the
river.
treatment plant.
They don't
or-
want that. That's like a side benefit to us. It saves us from having to
Or
treat
sanitary
clean
system
water.
at all.
They don't want
But
the
they don't want
over-
they don't want the sewage water into the
Going in
fresh
the
water.
river.
Yeah,
They don't want the overflows.
right.
So essentially, you're saying EPA doesn't want the system the way it is now.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
So why isn't it part of our separation project?
Because technically here, this is not a combined sewer. As if it functions correctly, it's not a combined sewer until you have a rainfall event. It's not a known combined sewer like West Hill where we know we have sanitary go right into storm sewer and vice versa. This
Kind
isn't,
of a technicality in
it is, yeah.
So Brian, what if we discover that that it really isn't a big problem with a lot of the houses having this done? Then how would you solve the problem?
Well, then we'd have to go back and look and see where are we getting those, how are we getting those surcharges? I mean, that's the easy assumption is that it's coming from those. If it's not, and we have a cross connection somewhere, then we have a bigger, or
We have a
not
bigger
bigger, but a
problem.
different
Yeah,
problem.
different problem.
And once upon a time, we did a study, and we did all kinds of crack sealing in the concrete down there, and we put new manhole covers on that didn't have the pick hole in them, because the thought was that it's getting into the sewer system, basically going down through cracks, pick holes, and so forth, and that was overcharging the system with water.
Start with the public system that you can access easily, and then you go to the private system and eliminate that. So this would be the next step in that. If I think at this point, and I haven't been here, but I would assume that we've done the public, the study, and we determined that our inflow is not as much as something else.
Is it possible that even without
They've done smoke checks.
the rainwater going, the people's water going in and adding to it, that it's still not able to accept all the water?
No, I would,
You think it
it
is?
functions normally without, we don't have any issues until we get a big rainfall event.
Okay.
So, no, it's functioning normally.
Are we sure that none of the Hauser Street stormwater doesn't go into the sewer?
Yes. We've inspected all the connections and
So
televised
there
all
is
those. No direct.
no known stormwater
There's
going
no,
in?
yes, there's no known direct connection to the sanitary sewer.
So option B can be done for $5,000.
Option B, the inspection can be done for roughly $5,000, but we don't have staff allocated to that because we haven't planned for this, and we don't have the, $5,000 isn't a whole lot, I guess, but we don't have the staff, and we haven't determined who's staff, if it's public works, if it's treatment plan, if it's
Contract.
community. Pardon?
You could
Good
contract
contract.
it.
We could contract it if it's community services, yes, but, and that's, like I said, that's just based on my math for,
But what I'm getting at is, that's, again, with your mentioning it before, that's a hypothetical if they're all 155.
correct.
With us being.
Well, we'd have to inspect all of them,
Okay,
everyone.
I understand, but what I'm saying is that with the inspection, we could come back and you could say, hey, you know what, there's only 75 of these homes
Yeah.
that have this, and now this is where we could address.
Mm-hmm.
So we could have kind of more definitive numbers, more accurate numbers as far as moving forward, and then saying, okay, do we even want to entertain potentially, looking at the backflow device, following up on that?
Right.
Because option A and B combined doesn't even come close to option C.
Option C really isn't an option, it's just,
You know?
it's just,
Reasonable.
it's
Well,
just a
that's what I'm
cost.
getting at.
And option C brings up what Tom said, that it's
Yeah.
really, you're violating the consent order, in essence.
But all I'm saying is that if it turns out, let's say that that we do have a potential for high rainfalls, we can we could look at the backflow device, we could look at some of those things that would, to me, would be more available. If these are homes that are prone to that, then maybe we could start looking at, a program or looking at ideas that we can say, hey, these are, this is something we can't change. But even if it was 155,000 at the worst case, that's still a lot better than what it is. But we don't even know those numbers. So I would be more interested in seeing if we can have, at least my opinion is to say, can we do option B and at least do the inspections, get some hard data, have you come back and say, hey, this is where we're at. We found 100 of the 155 homes. This is how we can move forward, and these are some better estimates than what like Phil had mentioned and you said earlier. We don't know if that's 5,000, we don't know if that's 7,000, or if it's 2,000.
Right. The only thing I would caution about option B is, at this point, it would be voluntary. People have to allow us in their homes. If we get to a point where we can't get full participation, then we have to look at other means to get in the home.
But let's say, for example, if we were to say that, hey, you know what, we're going to look at helping you put some backflow devices in.
We would have to know that. I guess we'd have to know that going in.
That doesn't solve the problem, though.
Yeah,
But does it stop homes getting water in their homes?
if they maintain it and the thing continues to work.
Because you have to work, you have to maintain, there's stuff you have to do. You have to
correct.
replace the flapper regularly, make sure
So I think
once
it's
a
every-
month that it's all
No,
cleaned out.
I think it's every so many years.
Once
It's
a
like
year.
4 or 5 years. to
But
change
see,
it.
my,
It doesn't last that long.
I don't know. I don't have one.
homeowners-
There's a
Homeowners
wide range of
maintain
quality
the plumbing.
backflow preventers. Some of them are a lot more complicated than a simple flapper, so.
Probably,
Right.
yes.
the other
I
option.
think that's low.
The other option I was thinking about, one evening was, and it's not one that I would want, but there is a house, there's a house on Mulberry that and there's others, but there's one on Mulberry that sets down a little ways, that's all of the sewage from the house goes into a pit, and then it's pumped up and out to the main line because it sets lower than the main line.
Injector pit.
Yeah, if the residents that have a backflow preventer and they wanted to eliminate that, they could put in a tank and then charge it and pump it, so, and
Yeah.
it's, then
But
it's not gonna backflow.
I had one of those
They're
not all
paying.
that long ago. Every 18 months or so, you gotta either replace the pump, or actually what it is there's a switch on it. So I had two pumps. One was on the plumber's shelf. When I had a problem, he switched them out and he put a new switch on the old one, and it sat there for a year and a half.
Yep.
No,
Well, it's
there's,
not a-
there's no such thing as no maintenance.
Oh, I
if you're a
know,
homeowner.
I understand that. The no maintenance portion would be, seeing what it would cost to dig up somebody's front yard and install, basically disconnect the perimeter tile from the sewer line, and then put a sump, but then you gotta put a sump pit back in the basement, you've gotta they'd have to pay for the pump. But you're eliminating it completely from the equation then. That water, any surface water that gets down by the foundation is no longer going into the sanitary sewer.
Right, and that defends your residents, one residence. It doesn't solve the problem of the inflow problem that we have with, that I mentioned in option B. It just keeps your house. The larger picture, the better solution would be option B, where we get all those homes disconnected so we don't have
Well, that's what I mean.
inflow in the system.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Eliminate it
correct.
from
And
the
we
system.
can get numbers to see what that would cost. Jim's had one done, so he's got some personal experience with what they cost.
We had one done.
Yeah.
You had a backflow preventer, or you had your sewer line fixed up and
Or
then
a cross connection.
and your cross connection fixed. Yeah,
If it's quick.
Quick.
I had a miniature pump station with backflow preventer put in.
Oh, okay.
And then when the backflow preventer closes, pump station surcharges, the pump kicks in, bypasses the backflow preventer and goes into the line so that it works after the backflow preventer closes.
Oh, okay.
Combination.
So in his
Approach,
yeah.
only
I was just, I was
And it
not gonna
probably
make a
costs more
comment.
than $1,000.
$7,000.
I was gonna say, that's a really low estimate for the backflow device.
Well, this is more than a backflow
Right,
device.
it is,
So-
it is.
As long as you guys let me in on this deal, though, I have this to say, but that $7,000 solves that problem, so that you can take the luxury of time to solve the rest of it, which is the I&I problem, the inflow and infiltration. Because it takes a while to do that. It takes a long period of time to get to that many houses, inspect them, look at them, and I know that for a fact because I participated in two of them.
So
Well,
we
you
could do
get-
A and B.
You get into the person's house faster if you say you call the city, you've got 2 months. If you're one of the first 100 people or first 50, you get $1,000 application towards the replacement, making this correct if indeed you need to have it done. The part that I don't know
If
is,
council funds that.
well, no, I understand. Well, it's better than $4 million.
Yeah,
That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
So,
right.
so we've talked about how when the backflow preventer kicks in, you have the inconvenience of not being able to use your plumbing. I get it, but how long does that last? Is that an hour and a half convenience? Is that a 3-day inconvenience?
No, I would say it'd be the same day. I mean, these are mostly flash events that surcharge the system. I would be very surprised if it was more than a day. I would say more of a period of hours.
But one kid flushes the toilet when it's pouring down rain,
Well,
and you're in trouble.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, you have storage capacity in your pipes in your home. So one flush isn't going to flood your basement if you have a backflow preventer. It'll take several to back up the whole system.
It'll come into your house, though.
If you're protected and I'm not, yes, there's that potential.
Yes.
Yes, correct.
Can you go to screen 11?
They have had people that's put sandbags
numbered
in
on mine.
their
Can you let me know when
toilet
I get
in the
there?
basement,
Keep going up to where
only
you
to
see the
have
rain
it
and
back
everything.
up
Keep going up.
to the first floor and go. That's pleasant.
Okay, keep going one more, I think. You had where the water was going into the house. Picture with the water going into the house.
Oh.
Right.
There?
Okay, right there.
Yep.
All right, so now go back up one. That's the one showing as if you had the backflow. This is the one showing without the backflow.
Yes.
You're basically saying that that black arrow that's going across, that's your main sewer line.
Yes, that's the
Okay.
normal flow towards the
So
lift station.
what stops us from putting a check valve or a backflow preventer, in a sense, in front of that arrow before it hits the main?
In the wet well,
Yes.
nothing would prevent us, but like I said, there are different limiting factors there. So if this pipe is already full, it's not going to help you.
But it's not gonna flow anything back.
But it won't. But if it's already full, it won't go out either.
Won't take any away.
It's just sits there
It's just gonna
static.
continue to fill up and get deeper and deeper and come into all the houses.
That's
then.
why it back pressures. So it doesn't matter.
So okay,
you can have this piece here be empty. Like the analogy, you know, if we all went out down the fire escape, the alley's huge. We can all fit in the alley, but if we can't get there, it doesn't matter how big the alley is. It doesn't matter if that thing's empty
Let's
or
say,
full.
go back to the next screen then. So then if we did the next one.
The one
We
with
had
the
a
backflow
backflow,
preventer on
yeah,
it?
the one with the backflow on it.
Okay.
So if we did that, if we did the backflows and the main check valve in there, it's still, you're saying the same thing, it would be?
Yeah.
Okay.
But even with the backflow preventers, we're still not fixing the problem.
Correct.
Because
No,
we are getting stormwater in the sanitary, which is what we're
That's why we
2028,
need
we've spent millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And we're still allowing it out here.
You got that backwards a little bit, but we're trying to keep the sanitary out of the storm. We're getting storm in the sanitary. It's worse to get sanitary in the storm because it goes to the river. It's not good to have storm in the sanitary because we're treating it. But that's the nature of the consent order in West Hill, is to keep the sanitary out of the storm.
I stand corrected, or I can set corrected.
Say that again.
So anyway, if we could talk more if you want. Those are the three options that I thought I was asked to put together. Option B, from my perspective, community perspective, is the best way to get rid of that infiltration. As Jim mentioned, that's a pretty big undertaking. Like I said, we could have city staff try to do some preliminary inspections, but if we're getting into dye testing or smoke testing, things like that to determine, then we're probably going to have an outside agency help us with that.
And we had smoke tests done.
And that was the public system.
And the engineer at the time said there's smoke tests done, and it was really, really dry, and you would have smoke coming up along the foundation if it's the perimeter tile. I beg to differ with him, but I'm not an engineer.
Wasn't there a smoke test done?
Pardon?
Didn't they do a smoke test?
Oh, yeah.
Or did they find out anything?
It's probably in a paper manual out at Public Works in the engineering office.
Smoke testing predominantly is there to check to see if
Roof
They
drains.
usually don't trap them, and so if you surcharge the sewer with smoke, you can stand out in the street and count all of the
Yep. Yep.
drains that are tied in.
Yep.
And those all came back clear then, you're saying?
I don't remember what this, I don't remember.
You don't remember?
And that's just one piece of the puzzle also,
Sure.
is just the
Yeah.
roof drain. So without getting into private residences and looking, if we were thinking that's what it is, then we'd have to do that to determine that.
I have a legal question on B, and maybe Greg could, what's the legalities of us being able to go into homes and doing the checks?
We could get an opinion for you. I can't give you a legal opinion, but Brian's correct. I mean, we'd have to get permission at this point in time to enter the homes. Smoke testing, and obviously you wouldn't need permission for, but you're gonna certainly want to let folks know. But
Well, I run a company that has 2 commercial buildings. We have a total of 6 backflow preventers, and every year I have to have them tested and submit the results to the city. There's no element in code for a residential backflow protection.
Only if they got a
No.
pool or a sprinkler system.
Should there be?
We-
I mean, we're dealing with a problem here. I don't know.
I would guess
Again,
if we
we don't know
don't,
that, though. We assume that there's 155 homes, and that's what I'm trying to get at. We can't even do any drive-bys and seeing
Well-
how it looks like when
He
you're
said he
actually.
could do some preliminary.
we
Okay.
could do preliminary, we could knock on doors if they let us in, that's all good and great. And if we can readily identify, a pipe going into a sewer stack, that's one thing. But, you know, if we're doing dye testing or smoke testing in people's residences, we're gonna have to have their permission unless, and if they don't cooperate, I guess we would try to get warrants or something like that to go in there. I don't know, but I don't think we wanna do that, but
No, I'm just thinking.
That's
more
the
from a
limitation of
getting
that.
some preliminary data and saying 90% of the homes do appear to have this, then we have something to
More
move forward
facts.
on.
yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
But
Yeah, that's fair.
But options B still, without addressing the storm water, you're just creating another problem. Don't forget.
Well, I mean, you can
you're
visually
putting
go
that-
outside and see if the gutters are going right onto the grass, or you see if they're visually going into a concrete, you know.
Yeah,
pipe
gutter
ground.
inspections
That's what I'm
are-
trying to
The
get at.
gutters.
Yeah, those are
I'll
simple.
guarantee the gutters are not coming down and going into a pipe and going down to the sanitary.
You've already visualized 155
I will
homes.
guarantee, no, just from, I've worked in the area over there. You won't find them on Dawson Street because it's the perimeter tile that's going in there. It's not the gutters, and downspout. There's a tiling at the footing level. That
That
comes
rainwater
around
goes down,
and
and
that
then it
goes
runs
into the sanitary.
And you're just gonna be putting that water above ground unless you put it into a storm line. So it's gonna be in the yards, it's gonna be in the streets, winter, it's gonna be icy. You're just creating another problem.
Well, we don't know if we're gonna create yet that. We don't know how much water we're really gonna get.
Assuming a large number of
again,
these homes
assuming
have that issue.
That when it rains, you know, that we can't take it into the storm, and you're also assuming that when it snows, that we're not gonna clean it.
No, because you're gonna be pumping that water all year long.
If it's in a sump pump situation, yeah, you would be. But like, I don't know how many have sump pumps or not. If we had foundation drains that were connected to the sanitary sewer and we take those out, then that foundation drain needs to go somewhere. So then it would go to a sump pump. Then it would be pumped up and out to the yard or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jim wanted to make a comment quick about that.
Mayor, Council, I was just going to ask the question, do you think that the underlying question here that would help you with this is if you had a true inkling whether that blue piece was really there or not? Because you can do some flow metering. It's not exactly the most inexpensive thing in the world to do, but you take meters and they're fairly sophisticated, but you put them down in these manholes, and they, in essence, can tell you how much time it takes from when the rain starts to if you get an increase in flow in that sanitary sewer. So it tells you, yes, you have a lot of inflow and infiltration into this pipe. And then base the decision based off of that data. You could do something like that where you really wouldn't have to, you would know you have that problem before you launch to, quote unquote, solve that problem.
And
The magnitude of the flow increase in any
Yes.
given lateral or
Yes,
header
it-
would tell you.
and
I'm sorry. All I wanted to say is that.
Yeah.
that's
What
a
kind
tool.
of money, Jim? You said it's not inexpensive.
I would be more than happy to look into it and get back to you. I would hazard a guess, but it's.
I think John Cook's looked at doing it at a couple different locations, and if I recall, at those locations, it was around 25,000, but I don't believe it was this big of an area that he was looking at.
No.
And I
But,
do,
I mean, you're not talking thousands, you're talking tens of thousands.
Okay.
I do know that Matt Chandler did the cheap version of that he went into the manholes and he actually put some paper or something on the steps in the manhole, and he checked when we had a rain event, and he went to pop the manhole to see what level it was at, but it was already absolutely chock full and all the paper was gone. It's getting a lot of water in it. But I don't believe that, and it just, there again, you know, I do not believe that there's going to be that much of an excess of water that we're gonna have to change from 12-inch storm sewer lines to 24 and double everything going out. I don't think that's gonna be necessary, but.
Brian, would you suspect that even in a non-storm event, that there's a water table issue where the drain perimeter tiles are always dumping water into the sewer?
I don't know that right now. We could investigate that.
Because I was
But I
thinking
don't know.
if you could estimate what the sanitary flow ought to be for that area and compare that to what you're actually
Sure.
getting. You may say, well, man, we're 24 hours, 7 days a week, we're dumping
Yeah,
groundwater into the
something
sewer
we
system.
could definitely investigate. A good indication of that is however many houses have sump pumps. Typically, that's what you're draining is your foundation drain from a water table that your sump pump runs all the time. I haven't been around to look and see how many people have, visible sump pumps out into the yard or anything. Judging by what Phil is saying, there's probably not many or any at all, but that's something we could investigate.
The only other thing you could do would be because most of the time they'd be at the back of the house.
Yeah.
And so you'd see a 2-inch or 1.5 inch PVC pipe sticking out. A lot of time, and I know one situation that we had a sewer line that was having an issue, and I made a comment to the resident. I said, if somebody's putting water from their sump pump into the sanitary, that aggravates the problem for the people that don't have backflow preventers and so forth. And later he said that he had pulled his out of the sanitary and it was now pumping into the backyard because he'd never thought about the others in the neighborhood.
So for this evening's purposes, I just wanted to present you some costs on those options. Going forward, we can take whatever direction you would like. We can investigate groundwater. We can investigate what it would cost to run a program to get into homes and do some inspections. I can come back with some more firm numbers if you'd like something like that. I guess just looking for a little guidance on how you want to proceed. You can let me know via email or let me know through Greg, or if you want to make a decision tonight, it's fine with me.
Is there a way?
Budgetary numbers for the different kinds of testing that you're talking about?
We'd have to have, it's
Yeah.
going to be coming around on budget season, so it's a good time to do it, but yeah, we'd have to figure some way to pay for it.
You're not going to do what Jim was suggesting probably until spring anyways. Right, because you're going to want to do that in wet
weather testing, yeah, so it would be not till spring. So
Is there a way, I know we have a camera system. Is there any way to run that camera up the residence sewer line? Or is
Our camera's too large for that.
It's too large?
Yeah, we'd have to have a private contractor do that.
You'd have to have a private contractor, and they would probably have to go from the house out?
Yeah, because you can't get up the main and then turn. You'd have to go from the house down.
Okay.
And that's, again, takes permission from the homeowner.
That's where the financial incentive from $4 million cost to the city versus
I wouldn't hold on to that $4 million too tight. Like I said, that's not an option.
I understand that, but I'm just saying, you're at about $4 million with that one, and you're at about $800,000 with the other one. Worst case scenario, $5,000 seems like a lot of money to do that, but I could very well be wrong.
If there aren't any other questions, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sounds like they want a little more information.
Yeah. One thing you might, Brian, you don't have to go back there, but if we did separate all the storm water and they dumped it onto the surface, like you mentioned, might have to have your department say, what's going to happen to all that water? Where's it going? Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's going to end up in somebody's yard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Last thing, comments from council. Spread, do you have anything?
No,
Oh,
nothing.
pardon me? Sure.
My name is Ralph Burr, 3015 Allen Street. I've been coming down here for the last 25 years. And you talk about communications. Nobody called and told me today that this was even going to happen tonight. I actually had the news on the radio this morning, and the gal on the radio said we was going to talk about this tonight. Anyhow, this is the city's problem, and the city's problem is causing my problem. That's what it boils down to. I'm on my third sewer valve in my basement because it's in a sewer line, and my sewer's 2 foot below my floor. And if you're not home, how can you close your valve? And when it backs up, if the sewer's backing up, it can get stuck behind that flipper that won't close at all.
You're right.
And if I dig up my floor, the water's gonna come in. I gotta cement my floor back shut once I get the valve in there, because if I don't, if I leave the hole open in my basement floor, it's gonna come right out of the dirt right into my basement, you know. I'm here fighting for myself, not the people in the other neighborhood, because it's the city's problem, and we pay sewer tax and everything, and you got this 1% sales tax. You can come up with money, you do for everything else. And so that's all I come to tell you. It's the city's problems, and it's causing my problems. And the sewer valves don't work all the time. I've seen it coming out of, I got a manhole in front of my house. It's been coming out of the top of that. And so then that sewer gets all over everybody's yard and everything else. It's a big problem. I know it. But you can't blame me to go check on the neighbors or anything. I'm not part of that. I'm just down here fighting for my house, because I have been. And it's the city's fault, because it's a sewer system. And I'm paying sewer taxes all the time. They should have did this a long time ago. I've been doing this for 25 years. Like I said, I've been coming down here the last 3 months, and now you're bringing it up. I don't mean, you know.
We're sorry that it hasn't been addressed before, but we're working on it now.
Yeah,
and we'll
I
keep
appreciate
working
it.
on it. Keep your eyes on the agenda, because they'll be coming back with some more information.
Well, I'd like to have somebody call me if they're gonna talk about this, because if I wouldn't have had the radio on, I wouldn't even been here tonight. Then I had to read about it in
You
the
said you were coming
paper.
every month.
Huh?
You said you were coming every month.
I know, I'm here this month.
Well, talk to Phil.
I'll be down to give you a Christmas present when I come next month.
Ralph, can you take pictures of that when you see that manhole overflow, like you said?
Well, it might be overflowing when I'm sleeping. I don't know.
I
See?
don't know.
If you
but,
do,
but
take
if
a
you were to
picture.
be
Yeah, I
able
will,
to, I
but
knew
it
last
has
time you
several
mentioned that.
times.
I know, you mentioned that.
And
so
I
that-
thought a way you could fix my problem, you go down the manhole on Hauser Street, right up there from Allen Street. You go down that manhole and put a backup valve right there so it don't back up on Allen Street. That'll solve my problem. That's all I'm worried about, my problem. The others, I'm not fighting for them, but you can't blame their cost on me, because I don't have nothing to do with them. I'm just by myself.
Okay, all right.
But that would solve my problem. You talk about backflow valves and everything, go down that manhole on Hauser Street where Allen Street goes into it and put a backflow valve right there. Then it won't back down my street. And then maybe a lot of other people start complaining about sewers backing up. But, you know,
'Cause then
people
it'd
don't
back up
mention
on
it because they
theirs.
can't sell their house. You know, it's just like Bill said. Yeah, it's been a problem for years, but people are quiet.
Well, we're working on it. Ralph.
Yeah, but-
We're looking
yeah.
at it, and so,
I
again,
just wanted to tell you, it's the city's problem. And the city's problem is causing my problem. See?
okay. Thank you, Ralph.
You're welcome.
Councilman Spread, do you have anything tonight?
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Councilman Harvey?
Yes, I do, Your Honor. I'd like to talk a little bit about the new Second Street parking ordinance and with the goal of discussing it enough tonight to see if there's a consensus to where we want to revisit that ordinance. And I got some, because it is, at least in my situation, it has some unanticipated consequences that I didn't realize was going to happen when we passed the ordinance. So if you would pass these down the line. What happens now that I guess I didn't fully appreciate it is, and I'll make it personal, I do most of my business downtown on the block that has Wester's Drug. And what the new rule right now is if I drive down, park in front of Wester's, go in, hand them a list of the prescriptions I want, and they say they're busy, and they say, well, come back in a couple hours. Well, then if I leave and come back and park in front of Wester's, I can get a ticket because I've parked more than once in that block. And, you know, I'm not as spry and as ambitious as I used to be. I don't want to have to walk 2 blocks to go to some other parking space to end up in Wester's. And then I got to thinking, if I went to Wester's, I'm just taking Wester's as an example, at some time during the day, got my prescriptions, wanted to come back in the afternoon to pick up a takeout at Salvatore's, I could get a ticket. So on this handout I gave you, the old rule, I use rule instead of ordinances, as I recall, is one vehicle per space for 2 hours maximum, which required monitoring the vehicle, the space, and the time they're in that space. And the new rule is one vehicle, one time per block. And the block is defined as both sides of the street for 2 hours max. And of course, then the monitor has to be the vehicle. They have to monitor both sides of the street and the time. Now, I listed 3 options, and no one option, I'm not promoting one over the other, but one option I thought was one vehicle, one time per block for 2 hours max, only on the one side, which means you could come back and park on the other side of the street. Say I wanted to go Westers, first time I park on one side, the second time I park on the other. Well,
How are you gonna enforce that?
well, I don't know. How do you enforce it now? The other option is one vehicle multiple times per block on either side for 2 hours total max. And that, again, it's an enforcement issue, and option C is, multiple times per block just on the one side. But the problem is, no matter what ordinance is, the meter attendant has to, even with the old ordinance, has to tag a vehicle where it's, identify the vehicle, identify the spot, and keep track of the time. So that's no different than any of these other things. They have to identify the vehicle, where it's located, and how long it's been in that spot. So, and I just think that our current rule is really a bad one, where you can only park once per block on either side of the street. And as I recall, Phil brought that up when we were discussing that before we voted on making the change. And I guess I didn't fully appreciate it at that time. I have to admit that, he's correct. It's really quite a burden to be able to park once per day per block. So I just want to get a consensus, because I would like to, at the next meeting, make a motion to I don't know what the word is, to call up and rediscuss this and maybe make some changes. And I just wondered if, we could have a consensus that it's worth doing.
I've had people note also that if they go like upstairs in Pearl Plaza, we go up for meetings at United Way or the Community Foundation. Then later, if you go back and eat supper at Port City Underground or something.
You could get nailed.
Right.
But it's after 5.
Right. Well, not always if you're going for lunch or.
Well, for
Yeah.
lunch. You said supper.
I said supper. My husband thinks he's got to eat at
That's later.
4:30.
I'm hesitating to say this, but I had the owners of Westers call me up and said they have had old-time customers say that if this stays this way, they're going to quit going to Westers. Because if they can't park twice the same day and deal with, get drugs and take a prescription in, take it out, and have to come back. Because a lot of times, if you go in there, they say, there was a question we had for the doctor. We contacted the doctor's office. They haven't gotten back to us yet, so we can't fill that prescription at this time. Well,
However, we do have loading zones for folks to drop off and pick up.
Is there one close to Western loading zone?
Right
there's
down
one
on the corner.
Yeah, there's one there, but
Yep.
Yeah, he spoke to
people
me
that
too.
go into Westers aren't going to park in the loading zone, I can tell you that.
And it's usually full.
Why couldn't they be educated to do that, Alan?
He talked to me also, and I suggested one solution for him might be to get some cards that could be laminated, and if you have to go back a second time to run in, they'll give you a card to stick under your windshield saying, in Westers for 5 minutes, I'll be right back.
It's, you're still
That's not
still
gonna
in
keep you from
violation of
getting
the
a
law.
ticket.
I know that, I know that.
It's a way to deal with
But
it,
it
though.
might be easier than changing the whole law.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about that, because it's not hard to make some changes. The real bugger is that we've only allowed once per day per block.
Which was the
And you-
recommendation by the
and I
traffic
think
committee, right?
Phil suggested once per day per at least block face, at least you could park on the other side of the street. But you can't do that now. And there's, there's a store down at the, I guess it's Mulberry, well, no. down by, across the street from the church, there's a retail store there. There's Wester's, there's Salvatore's, there's Neil's, there's the Riverview Restaurant, I think what they call it. Across the street, you got the bank. I mean, there's a lot of, that's a busy block, and if you can only, if you just limit it to one time for that whole damn block, that's pretty damn restrictive.
Well, and it's restrictive for anyone down along there.
Well, yeah, it applies
it
to the
doesn't-
whole, because you could go back and, you know, do that same scenario in any other block. There, if there's
Yeah.
multiple retail businesses,
And my wife agrees with you, so we gotta change it.
well, my wife agrees with me too, but I think she's not here voting.
Well, I know.
So Alan, you're asking if the council will
If there's just
agree
at least four of
to
us.
talk
would,
about it again?
Talk about it again seriously to, you know, these options or some other options, somehow to resolve the issue that, you know, one time per block is my complaint, I guess you could say. My concern.
The problem we're trying to address isn't the customers coming down to buy and frequent the shops.
Right.
It's the employees working in the downtown, it's business owners in the downtown, and possibly tenants above that are causing the issue.
Yeah. Well, I don't have any problem with 2 hours max per block, but more than once. And how do they monitor it? I don't know, but they're monitoring the time there somehow.
Then if you live upstairs, all you have to do is move your car. I mean,
Per
we're back to
block,
where we
though.
were.
No,
Yeah.
it's 2 hours per block, max. So they can, moving their car to a different stall doesn't solve
No.
that. They're gonna get tagged if they're in the same block for more than 2 hours. I don't mind that. At least it allows multiple trips, short trips into the same business.
Councilman Spread, do you want to talk about it again?
No, I'd like to give it a little time. We've only been doing it a couple days.
Santos?
I brought up earlier that when we did this was by the traffic committee, and my understanding is that we were doing this because of all the same concerns that we mentioned earlier, but also because we didn't have parking with all the new construction going on. So I want to review this after the construction was done. I don't feel that we need to make this change yet, in my opinion.
Councilman Natvig?
No, not,
Bill?
I'd be more than willing to talk about it at any time.
Same.
This doesn't count as a vote because he's not proxy, but I talked to Bynum tonight, and he has a problem with the current parking ordinance too, but he did not give me permission to vote proxy, so, but I'm just passing on his sentiment.
Well, this isn't a real vote anyway, it's just a
Right.
consensus, so.
So I didn't catch Santos's.
3-3.
Santos said no, so we got 3-3.
Well, I would strongly recommend that we, even at 3-3, normally a tie vote, if it's a vote, it goes down and it stays what it is. I personally believe this is wrong.
Well, let's make it 3.1 to 3.
You could bring it up again when Bob's here,
If he's here.
we hope.
Well, actually, there's nothing to prevent me from bringing it up anytime. It just may get voted, not seconded.
That's
Yeah.
right.
But anyway, somehow we're going to discuss this again, whether we
Okay,
change it or keep it the same.
That's fine, but
Okay.
I would like to be able to at least,
How would the
some
construction
time.
change this?
well, the whole point when we talked about with the come and go is gonna come in with more parking spots. We had all the.
That doesn't help me parking twice in front of Wester's.
Well, do you want to bring in meters downtown then too?
Yes, that would be a solution.
Then that may be a solution, but.
But that doesn't keep tenants and workers from just plugging the meter. I mean, that doesn't solve
that was the
keeping the
whole
cars
purpose of it.
out of the block. Unless you want to make it 15 minutes max parking per meter, I mean, then you got to turn it over. But I don't go to that, because if I'm going to a restaurant,
I will go ahead and consent to, let's go ahead and listen to some of these options so that it'll be 4.
All right.
Changing your vote?
Yes,
So
I'm
Alan
changing my
changed,
vote.
or
It's not a vote, it's a
Santos
consent.
changed his
Not a vote.
Oh, changing your
consensus
consensus,
vote.
okay.
Just to,
So you got
So we
enough
can-
to
we
bring
can
it
hear
up again.
here,
Are we bringing this up at the next meeting or the next in-depth session?
I think the next in-depth.
Is there a parking committee?
You're gonna have to find out a way to enforce it
Yeah.
anyway.
Pardon?
It's really
Sounds
just a
like they wanted it
discussion-
the next
It
in-depth.
doesn't matter.
A discussion item for the next
Yep.
in-depth session. Okay.
In the meantime, people are gonna get tickets
Yes, they are.
over something we may change.
Irritated.
They're gonna get irritated in tickets, yeah,
Well, at least they're getting it back on the agenda, right?
right.
Did you have anything else?
No, that's it, Your Honor.
Councilman Natbig?
I don't have anything.
Councilman Harvey, I already said you. Why do you have down twice?
Oh, I can talk twice.
No.
Councilman Saucedo?
No, I don't have anything.
Councilman Raywalt?
Nothing tonight.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Nothing.
Staff?
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
All right. I just had a couple things. I wanted to ask everybody to please continue to pray for the First Baptist Church in Texas. I know they're still going through a rough time and will for many, many years. Next, I'd like to thank the people of Muscatine for coming out in record numbers to vote this past week. Many people who had never voted before registered and then voted for the first time, including one man who was 78 years old. That's a win for all of us. Who people voted for was not the only highlight, but rather the fact that the people said with their vote, this is what I think and what I think matters. That's another win for everybody. I want to thank all the voters. I want to thank all of the candidates who stood up and raised their hand and said, I want to help my community. And thank you to each and every one of them. Thank you from all of us. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Good evening.
Here they come.